Good morning, folks. It's about 2.5 hours before London opened on March 10th. So a day later than I usually do my analysis. Monday's already happened. Taking a look at the pound New Zealand dollar chart, you can see we've pretty much continued our move up after bouncing off the daily 200 last week. Potentially, we could see an early bounce off 206. Or even the monthly pivot where we have the super convergence zone. If we do get back down to the monthly pivot, be careful taking a bounce off there. Make sure you manage as aggressively as we could stay below this trend line. If we do get a bounce back up, first target obviously WR2, but we should make another run at 2.1 if we continue to the upside. All right, pound CAD, we've made several runs at 188, down here by the daily 55. Haven't really been able to push down through there, so I'd prefer to see a break back above the 4-hour 55. We pull back for a long, potentially for a move back up to 1.95. We can take a look at the daily and see that we haven't been able to break below this level, which is where we have the daily 55 moving up to. That being said, if we don't make a clean break back above the 4-hour 55 and the Dynafibs, we could definitely be in for another run down to the daily 55. Pound odd, now that we've finally seen a significant pullback bounce off of the daily 55, I think we should be seeing a run up to 2.0. So currently I'll look for a move back down to about the 196.50 area and then a bounce off of there to continue to the upside. If we just continue to move up, we run into the 23.6 fib. We could take a break of the 23.6 fib and then a bounce off of there, but that's definitely on the riskier side, so I'll probably just leave it alone if we don't get at least a small pullback in the next couple sessions. Pound yen, we've moved back above all the EMAs at this point, but I'm inclined to leave this pair alone, as if we see a break to the downside on pound USD and a subsequent move up on USD versus the yen, then we're just going to see volatility on this pair. It's just going to swing up and down and not really provide us with a great trade. So I'll leave this alone into a yet more defined direction from the EMAs. Pound USD has seen a bit of a move up from 1.5 where we stopped, and you can see that we've started to move away from the 151.40-ish area. If we continue to move down, we can look for a break below the 1.5 area, pull back, and then confirmation to short. And if we get another bounce off of that area, you can look for a pullback all the way up to 152 or 152.50 in this area where the 4-hour 55 comes down. Euro New Zealand dollar looks like we're starting to make a rejection from the 4-hour 55. It would have been really nice if this wick actually touched 149. But it looks like we may continue with a move down during the London session. Just be careful with the super convergence zone right around the weekly pivot. We may even want to wait until we get a break below that level and then see if we get a pullback with a reaction to short from there. Euro versus the CAD. Not too much movement this week. Hanging out in a near the low, so potentially a pullback up to 1.38, and then a confirmation to short from there. Or we could also see counter trend from either 135, or we may fall all the way down to 133. We have WS2 at 133.23. So a bounce from 133 and a move back up above WS2 should signal a decent pullback for a counter trend trade. Obviously, the preferred trade is if we pull back from here and then take a short from around 138. Euro AUD, we've pulled back a little bit more compared to the CAD. I'd like to see a pullback back up to 142 and then a short signal. Euro JPY, we didn't quite make it back up to retest 132. We've just started to move back down a little bit, so we may continue short from there. I would prefer to see a pullback back up to 132. However, if we do get a solid break below 130.50, that could provide an area to short from as well. The Australian dollar versus the New Zealand dollar. If you have a look at the daily chart, it looks rather bearish, and so far we have failed to close above the daily 55 on the 4-hour. So any break below the 4-hour 200, any solid break should give us a nice short signal. Of course, we have some congestion in the way, but if we do start to move down with decent momentum, we should break through those areas, as the daily 55 is obviously a much stronger support and resistance area. Of course, if we do manage to close above, then shorts will pretty much be off the table for me. On JPY, again, looking for a short here. Last week we failed to close above the daily 55. I missed the trade off of the 4-hour 200, which we did break back below the 4-hour 55 as well. We still haven't closed below 93, so potentially we have a move back up. If the 4-hour 55 holds, I'll look to short from there, definitely moving my stop to break even as we approach 93. But I'll look for 93 to eventually break and a move down to 92 or lower. All right, AUD USD, I expect to continue to move down. However, we need a pretty big pullback, I think, to get in on a short trade. Potentially, we have a counter trend long from 0.76. I would prefer on the short side to see a move back up at least to the 38.2% fib, around 77.20 in that area. New Zealand dollar versus the yen. Essentially, we're sitting at equilibrium between the last big down move. If we take a look at the daily, that was the completion of the M pattern here, which is what I have fibbed. You can see we're sitting right around the 50% with a slew of EMAs there. If we continue to stay below the daily 200, that can provide a short, and if we break back above the daily 55, that can provide a long. Of course, we can get a lot of volatility in between those areas, so make sure that we have a solid signal to short. If we take a look at the candles here, where we initially broke the daily 200, we really don't have any kind of good confirmation that we're going to continue a significant move below that area as of yet. New Zealand dollar versus the US dollar had a nice drop last week and into this week. To short with the trend, look for a pullback to this super convergence zone, which is the weekly pivot, and it's going to be the 4-hour Dynafibs and 4-hour 55 when we get up there. Also, you can see we have the 4-hour 200 and daily 55 not terribly far above there. Pretty likely we'll just continue our move down, and we could see a counter trend trade form around 172 with the weekly support to 171.82. Or I'm sorry, 0.72, not 172. Euro USD, of course, had a large move down. I'd like to see a pullback to the 1.1 area around the 50% fib to short. Of course, we may see the weekly pivot give us a reaction area. I don't really want to counter trend trade this pair, so those will be the areas where I'll look for a pullback and then a continuation to short. Looks like USD versus CAD and USD JPY didn't unpause when I wanted them to, so we'll take a look at those again. A little bit out of order. So we are pretty much at the high from a couple weeks ago on USD CAD. I would prefer to see a pullback down to the weekly pivot to long. We also have counter trend options from midterm fib right around WR1 and also WR2. As you can see, they correspond with the last two highs prior to a couple weeks ago. And US yen, I'd like to see a pullback anywhere between 121 and basically 120.40. You can see we had basically consolidation before we just started moving back up again at the beginning of the week around the 50% fib. So it's a pretty large area to look for longs in. It's about 50 pips, but you want to make sure that you've got a reaction essentially off one of those three areas with a good pattern and signal to long. We are right at 122, so we could see a move down from there. If we get a spike up to 122.36 and then nice rejection, we could move down from there. And then of course we have WR3 at 123.45, and above that we have 124. Those would all be places where we could look for a potential counter short. All right, folks, have a good rest of the week. Happy trading.